Right, this one is very close to my heart, and I don't actually know how the wider community is going to react to it, but that's why we do these videos in the first place, to spark a fire and see who wants to put it out and see who wants to make that fire burn. But now that we do have pretty much three major companies running in the wrestling world, that being WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and All Elite Wrestling, and of course all three are running pay-per-views, I'm getting a little bit worried about what is being perceived to be the standard length of one of these shows. Take this weekend just gone, if you are watching this video the day that it goes live. New Japan's Raw Quest went around about just shy of 4 hours, All Out went way over 4 hours, and of course WWE, who didn't have a pay-per-view specifically this weekend, are the king of doing this. I mean, how surprised were you when you watched SummerSlam back in August and went, oh, it's only 3.5 hours. I was so shocked, I collapsed on the floor and had to ring a friend. And he was like, Simon, this is just not a problem. You need to grow up. And I said, you don't understand. And I don't mind if a card earns this right and it makes sense. But now, this isn't the exception anymore. It's becoming the norm. And I think it's something that all pay-per-views need to stop. Why? Here is why. I'm sure there are fans out there who disagree with me, but personally, every time this goes down, I can literally feel fatigue setting into my body. That's just how a human being works. And that gets worse when you get to the main event and two people want to try and put on a 40-minute classic. It doesn't matter how much you love something, there's always going to get to a point where you're like, I just can't watch this anymore. And that goes down to something like sex. There's always a guy out there that wants to go, oh man, I want to bone all night. No, you don't. If you boned all night, your penis, your area would be raw. It would be horribly, horribly raw. It would be red, and then you probably wouldn't be able to have sex for a very long time. And that actually does tie into pay-per-views, because I know casual fans that will come in, they'll watch WrestleMania, it will be 7 hours, and they go, you know what, if that's what I have to do, I'm gonna leave it a long ass time before I come back and I watch again. So wrestling and penises, it all ties in. It's also starting to impact on the quality of the output as well, because when you have free reign to go as long as you want, you're like, well, we'll just go as long as we want. Why not? The reason WWE used to top out their pay-per-views at 3 hours is because they had a pay-per-view company that said, look, we'll only give you enough time to do that. So WWE had to sit down, they had to get their pens, their bits of paper, and figure out, well, who do we get where, and how long does each match go? We only have 180 minutes to do this. In the era of the network, though, that is not an issue, and in fact, WWE has now gone the other way, because the watch time metric has become incredibly important to them. It means in press releases, or when they do their financial calls, they can say, oh wow, look, our watch time has gone up by 120%, and it sounds like people are investing in it, even though most of the time it's just fans watching the longer events, which pushes that number up. And we do that because we're a sucker for punishment. We're morons. With that in mind too, does anybody out there actually think it's a good idea to book a show based on trying to increase a watch time metric? Any kind of show that you want to put on should be there because it creatively makes sense. And you have two performers that have to have a match or a stipulation that is going to take a program to the next level. When you go, well, we've got, I don't know, Zack Ryder versus Mojo Rawley. That's no disrespect for them, but you go, we can let them go 28 minutes just because we can. How about you don't do that and you come up with something different? Now, that's a bad example because WWE doesn't use either of those guys. They must have some kind of disease, and WWE wants to stay as far away from them as possible, but I think that makes a lot of sense. Book to be fun and book to be entertaining. Don't book because it makes it look good in a piece of admin paper. And I think this does apply to AEW as well. Now, don't get me wrong, don't go crazy in the comments. I'm not saying All Out was a bad show. I think All Out was a very good show, and like most All Elite Wrestling content, I just have a good time. Even though if you were going to ask me to rank them, I probably would put All Out in third, All in top, and Double or Nothing in the middle. However, when I was watching AEW's third biggest pay-per-view to date, I did think to myself towards the end, you know what? I am waning a tad. And it was saved by that incredible ladder match and a very, very intriguing and well put together main event. But simply put, not every single bout on your show needs to go 15 minutes plus. We can have a 3-minute match. We can have an 8-minute match. We can have a 14-minute match. And I know when it comes to AEW, that will get better when they have television. They can actually build feuds and give us stories. But hey ho, even then, I still don't want 4 hours plus to be the norm. I just don't. shoot me, don't shoot me. When you do toy around with match lengths, I just think it makes a pay-per-view far more easier to digest. And let's not poo-poo on that either. Again, the one I always go back to, Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg at WrestleMania 33 that didn't even go 5 minutes. And that was at WrestleMania where WWE can't control themselves at all. But because they did do that, and because it was so quick, it made the entire card better. Well, at least that's how I see it. And what we should point out is that standalone, this wouldn't be a problem. I don't want you to think I watched All Out and threw my toys out of the pram just because it went over 4 hours, but it ties into an industry trend which is growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. I mean, if we get to the stage where 1 week WWE is doing a pay-per-view that long, and then the next week All Elite Wrestling is doing a pay-per-view that long, and then somewhere in between New Japan is doing a pay-per-view that long, I just don't see how we're all not going to eventually take our faces and plow them into the walls. And I understand the argument to that is, Simon, you don't have to watch them. Well, actually, I do. I do for ups and downs. That doesn't actually tie in. I'm just letting you know. Let's take that. Let's take ups and downs, and we'll throw it over there. You're right. You don't have to watch, but wouldn't you prefer it if you could? Wouldn't that just make you feel a little bit better? I think I can just smell the law of diminishing returns slowly creeping up onto us, and I think we should brush that guy away before he sinks his teeth into our backs and all of us fall on the floor and die. I also think if we did mess around with this a little bit, the events would be better. For example, if you give me a piece of paper and a pen and say, Simon, I want you to write a story with a great beginning, a great middle, and a great end, but you've only got an hour to do it and you can only have 500 words, I would guess I'm going to be far more creative than if you give me the same task and go, nah, you can just get it done in a year if you want. I'm not saying there isn't room in wrestling for the latter, there absolutely is, but let's look at Clash of the Champions. If we get to Clash of Champions and that pay-per-view is 240 minutes, I am going to stand here again and say something has gone 100% wrong. There's already 9 matches on that card, and if they all go long, it's going to be exhausting. And that's before you tie it into everything else. If you want to be the strong 100% hardened fan in 2019, come October, you're going to have to watch 3 hours of Raw, you're going to have to watch 2 hours of NXT, you're going to have to watch 2 hours of AEW, you're going to have to watch 2 hours of SmackDown, and then every now and then you are going to have to watch a 4 to 4.5 hour pay-per-view. You can't have too much of a good thing, and it's why 1 hour TV programs work so well. They give you just enough to keep you interested, but they don't give you enough that you get bored. Plus they make you wait 7 days, and when those 7 days are up, you're like, man, I absolutely will watch another 60 minutes of that. It's easy to digest, and it makes me feel good. You get them hooked and you give them just enough rope so they get their fix, but if you give them too much, they become a junkie, and if you become a junkie, nothing is going to be all right. And I know this will encourage debate, and maybe it just comes down to the simple fact of where I am at my life in the moment, because it also does apply to video games. I was thinking this the other day. I really miss the days, maybe I'm just old, but I really miss the days when some video games used to be 8 to 10 hours long and you could get them done in a weekend, even if they did just funnel you down a corridor for that length of time. But today, of course, everything has to be an online persistent world and ask you to do around about 50 hours before you even unlock an achievement or a trophy. Sometimes you can't even open a door for the first 10 hours, and I guess the former just suits my tastes better. Give my adrenaline a quick hit and then make sure you're out of there before it starts to wear off. So to finish, because we have mentioned them a couple of times, we do have to give a shout out to NXT, because we did have NXT UK Cardiff over the weekend, and that went a very respectable 3 or so hours long. I mean, it felt shorter than all the others, and that's because it was, and it's something that Triple H does very nicely, and why I'm intrigued to see what happens when they do indeed go to 120 minutes in September. Let's just hope they don't muck around with it too much, because I think that actually could be the beacon and the example that we all look up to, because so far they ain't got that much wrong. But there is no rhyme or reasons in 2019. Things are changing on a whim before you can even say hubba balooba, which is a word I just made up. But yeah, that's my point. That's how I feel. And I felt like it was just more apparent this weekend with all of those shows, especially because Clash of the Champions is soon, and I worry what WWE is going to do. And again, WrestleMania 35 was 7 hours long, and by the time we all got to that main event between Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey, I think we can all agree it wasn't as good as it should have been, simply because we had already seen so much wrestling. I mean, think of the fire and the electricity and the magic that Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins had. That's because they were at the start of the show and everybody was up. 7 hours later, everybody was down. I mean, 7 hours is a work day. Nothing ever needs to be 7 hours, especially not a wrestling pay-per-view. Bring back those 3 hour ones. I'm starting the campaign today. Now, don't forget to leave a comment below and let me know what you think about this, and my word, am I going to be intrigued. I look forward to those tweets. Like, share, and subscribe. Head over to whatculture.com, read yourself some articles, follow What Culture on Twitter at What Culture WWE, watch more videos here on What Culture Wrestling. My name is Simon from What Culture. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for tuning in to the Y Series, where of course I air an opinion and then we fight it out like the warriors that we are. And I will say this, sometimes on the Y Series I'll take an idea or a thought process that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think is interesting, and I'll throw it out there. That ain't the case with this. I 100% believe wrestling pay-per-views are too long, and I would like them to go back to being not short, but just, it don't even have to have a time. It doesn't have to be 1 hour, it doesn't have to be 3 hours, it doesn't have to be 72 hours. Serve the product, serve the show, serve the storylines, serve the creative. That's it. Even if a pay-per-view for some reason was 45 minutes long, but it was the best thing that anybody has ever seen, they're not going to feel ripped off if we're talking about the network, or maybe you would if you paid like $50. But if it was so good, you couldn't help but talk about it, you watched it again and again and again and again and again, you'd probably get away with it. Something to think about, and I'll see you soon.